Hello and welcome to 15-Minute Coffee. My name is Alan, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. David Dunne. So David is a performance nutritionist with a decade of experience working alongside elite athletes in a range of different sports, from rugby to cycling, and even working with the Ryder Cup team. So David's not just about fueling athletes for gold medals, but he's also the founder of Hexis, a cutting-edge app used to create personalised nutrition plans for athletes. So David, welcome to the show.
Thanks a million for having me, Alan. Yeah, very much looking forward to diving in and having a chat.
Yeah. I want to start with that sort of word high performance. It's often sort of seen as, a combination of talent, hard work, strategy, but where does nutrition fit into that sort of,
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, ultimately when people are going out, certainly from a sporting perspective, or when you're looking at the physical demands of high performance, and even the cognitive perspective, ultimately the work you do, let's say the strains and stresses that you put on your body in the gym when you're looking to get stronger, get faster, etc. The food you eat before, during, and after that training will ultimately determine how well your body responds and whether that sort of response is either amplified or dampened to that stimulus. So I think it plays a huge role in developing those physical qualities. And even when we're looking at sort of skill-based sports and when we're looking at the cognitive demands of elite sport, we also know that nutrition can play quite a large role in ultimately that skill execution, whether it's, what you're doing on the golf course, or it looks at um, your shooting accuracy in the NBA. So yeah, I would say we're part of an essential pillar of we're not the only piece of high performance, but
mm,
we're part of one of the essential pillars for.
yeah. And like you mentioned, there's a different range of sports and fields that an athlete could be. And I suppose the thing about athletes is they're all individuals, and no two individuals are the same. So what's the sort of approach when you're looking at personalized nutrition and how to get the best out of people through that?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think, fundamentally, and a big thing for us at Hexis is, we understand that every athlete is unique. There is no such thing as the average athlete. And as a result, we need to look at what the individual's requirements are, but also we need to look at what is the type, the intensity, and the duration of the activity that they're doing, and look at those in combination with their lifestyle to then start to determine how we should be fueling for and recovering from the exercise stimulus. So those inputs really allow us to start to drive those personalized recommendations. Um, I think ultimately those personalized recommendations are what allow people to make the most of their work, because you get a one size fits all, and you might get some solid basics in place, but ultimately you'll be leaving some money on the table.
Yeah, and I suppose the other side of that is you can present this sort of personalized plan, but how do you find the sort of application of that, or how do you work with athletes to ensure that they're following that, or is there leeway, or is there sort of an approach where you find?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at, ultimately what you're talking about is human behavior. Everyone can have a plan. Most people will know that it's not good to drink 10 pints, but some people will still go out and do it despite knowing the health benefits. So I think it's important to take a step back and consider, what needs to be in place to actually drive a behavior. And typically as humans, there are sort of three things that will largely influence behaviors. One, do we have the capability to do something? So do we psychologically know what we should be doing? And then do we also have the physical skills? The second then will be the opportunity. An opportunity can be either social or it can be physical. So I'll give you an example of a social opportunity. I could be with a group of friends who all really like to go to the pub. That could be putting me in a situation that I might not be in if I was with a different group of friends. From a physical perspective, if I, want to eat healthier food, do I have that around me? But I suppose the biggest driver of human behavior is typically motivation. And motivation can be reflective or it can be automatic. Automatic would be something that you'd instantly want to go and do something without a deliberate thought process. You wake up and you brush your teeth, not because you're thinking about it. You've just built that automatic behavior. Reflective is typically a little bit more deliberate, where You might see, think, or feel something that would elicit a response that wouldn't drive you or make you want to do that. So maybe you see somebody who you aspire to be like doing something and you go, maybe I should do that too. So I think really when it comes down to adhering to a plan, it's important for us to understand, I suppose, fundamentally those three buckets, and each of those three buckets, two subsets in terms of what's driving that behavior. But then how can we move the needle in that person as well? Because the plan really acts as that, let's call it an implementation intention layer. There's a default, if this, then I should do this. So it's a nice safety net. And I think probably the biggest opportunity for most practitioners or most people working in high performance sport is understanding how to move those different components of behavior, and in particular motivation. We are generally motivated through hope and fear, pleasure and pain, and then social acceptance and social rejection. So I'll give you an example. If you're working with somebody who wants to lose weight, who has tried to lose weight and they have failed to lose weight, most people will go in and they'll say, look, you need to be in a calorie deficit and we're going to put your protein at this, so we're going to protect your lean mass. Typically, knowledge is not the problem in that person. They've probably received that information before, they've tried and failed. A lot of it then can be around how do we actually motivate that person. So you now have somebody that knows what to do. So capability is not the problem. But because they've tried and failed, they might have low self-efficacy or this low belief about their own capabilities. So now we need to look at how do we target motivation and how do we use other types of, let's say, active ingredients of a behavior change intervention to promote problem solving, focused on past successes, and start to build that person's confidence up in their own abilities to help to drive that change. So although the plan acts as a really important backbone of an intervention and that implementation intention, it is how you engage that person around it to bring it to life. It's really what can drive change over.
That's so interesting because I think in all walks of life, and probably high performance especially, but in any walk of life, like, it's all well and good to have a plan. And, I think Muhammad Ali said, like, everyone has a plan until you get hit in the face. Or it's like, there's this idea of, how can you bring that sort of perfect plan into reality and into your life? And I suppose for athletes, it's like when you have such a focused and driven life, it's like you need to really get that implementation perfect.
Yeah. And I think different people are motivated by different things. Like, with technology now, we're in a position where we can make quite dynamic plans. So you might have a plan today. So let's say you're using Hexis. We might look at what training session you have planned today. You might then go out and do your workout, but then we might passively harvest the digital trace information from your wearable device. So, okay, we made a prediction that this would happen. Now what's actually happened? And then we'll integrate that to then say, here's what your recovery period should be based on what's actually happened. Even just using real data and providing information more from a biological feedback perspective can increase somebody's motivation because it feels more tailored to them, because it is more tailored to them. So I think there's, static plans will ultimately have higher levels of attrition. But if you look at more dynamic and what I would say are quite continuous tuning plans or interventions where we can start with something, but as the day progresses, it evolves and it utilizes real-time, ecologically valid data, that can also drive somebody's adherence because they know it is tailored to them as opposed to a PDF that they might have bought on the internet.
Yeah. And you mentioned wearables there, and in the past I've had a Whoop, and honestly the just knowledge of, okay, I'm watching, it's that sort of thing of you can see what's happening at a real time. And I don't know how accurate that is, but it's, even as you said, the behavior change that comes along with it. Like, you're seeing after drinking 10 pints, your recovery is 1%. So that feels like an easier thing to be like, okay,
Yeah.
I can see that written down. Won't do it again.
Yeah. So that's a really good example of biological feedback, guys. When you look at a behavior change intervention, you'll often be looking at, let's say, what area you're trying to target, and if that capability, opportunity, motivation, you'll then start to map that into a little bit more granular detail against something called a theoretical domains framework. You'll select an intervention function, and then the layer below that is what you call a behavior change technique. And for example, there, getting a notification, which would be a prompt or a cue, along with biological information and then also information about health consequences, those three things start to collide to give you that and then make you feel a certain way. Uh, I think when we start to look at things like wearables, that's where they're starting to evolve to do quite good jobs. So although the quality of the data is still very questionable, some wearables are more accurate than some wearables do things better than others. So for example, some wearables will do a better job capturing sleep data. Other wearables will do a better job capturing exercise data. Um, but ultimately, they're starting to create stories and they're starting to create narratives. So what you alluded to is a recovery score. Now, that recovery score is aggregated from a number of metrics: heart rate variability, resting heart rate, sleep, and respiratory rate. It takes quite a binary view certain things. So for example, it will assume a higher heart rate variability is a better thing and a lower heart rate variability is a worse thing. And actually that binary view is not quite true when you look at the individual metric. Higher is not always better and lower is not always worse. Typically you'll have a range and you're looking for that range to trend in a certain direction. But again, it's using that to drive a narrative for you to make you feel a certain way and then elicit a certain response. So any aggregated map that you get from one of these devices, whether it's a recovery or readiness score, I would always encourage people to look at the actual data, the layer below, and upskill themselves on understanding, okay, what does heart rate variability actually mean? If my resting heart rate is elevated, what can I infer from that, as opposed to a general score, which might be misleading.
Yeah, and I guess it comes back to what we were saying earlier about every individual is different, and one sort of recovery score might mean one thing to them. And it's like it's not, life isn't binary. It's in that sort of gray zone and gray space that we live. So, and actually, just on that, how do you sort of see? Like, I know Hexis is primarily geared towards that sort of high performance, but like, is there is it accessible to athletes of all sort of levels, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, Hexis is an intelligent, personalized fuel planner and something that's proven to enhance performance. At our core, we understand that every athlete is unique. And really what we've designed is something that not only can help somebody win a medal at the Olympics, but if you're going out and you want to improve your your 10K run, you're training for a marathon, you're training for your first crit race, um, anyone who's in that, let's say, enthusiast space that just wants to improve their own performance or reach their potential, it's very easy and accessible to use for them. So yes, we work with a lot of the world's top athletes, but actually we have thousands of people below who are already using it just themselves to improve their own individual performance, despite the fact they've got full-time jobs.
Mm, yeah, and I think that's important as well. And I wanted to, before we wrap up, I wanted to sort of touch on more on you, and sort of working with those elite athletes must come with its own pressures, and I suppose it's a high stakes game. So how do you manage your own sort of internal pressure, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. I think, it's I'm very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. I'm conscious that, getting to work with some of these athletes, organizations, and environments is a real privilege. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the best athletes in the world are still people. They're still human beings. And that's one thing that really grounds us and really makes us all the same. The Rory McIlroys of the world they're good people. They're just more talented than a lot of us in their own domain. So for me personally, it's important for me to understand my role in that environment and what I can do as a person to add, both from a performance setup, but then I think it's also important to recognize when you're in an environment and you're in a camp, you can be one of two types of people. You can be an energy giver or you can be an energy taker. And you need and have to be an energy giver there. because you're helping to drive other people along. But I think for me, I'm very confident in the structures, the setups, and the processes we put in place. So I'm not necessarily worried about my performance. I do a bit to manage my own energy where I can. So I focus myself of what I can do to make sure I'm an energy giver every day of that I'm in an environment, because ultimately it's my job to help other people realize their potential. And in the same breath, recognize people that you're interacting with, they're just humans. Um, and I think that really helps as well. I think a lot of people think of athletes as numbers or statistics, and you know, it sounds so basic, but when you just treat somebody like a human being, and you start to build and develop that relationship and trust, it really goes a long way.
Yeah, and like I think two things there, like you mentioned, your confidence in the value you bring to the setup is probably, it removes that doubt, and it gives you, there's obviously always doubt, but it gives you that confidence to go in to any setup and say, okay, I know what value I bring, and that's the belief. And then I suppose also on the human element, like that's what this podcast about as well. It's like, anyone can spark a conversation with anyone, and at our basic level, we'll have something in common, that we're human, and that's, I think, special.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, the best thing we can do is, build relationships, build trust, be a good person, and most things typically work out.
Yeah, lovely way to finish. And thanks again for your time, David, and best of luck with everything, and I'll chat to you soon.
No worries. Thanks a million, Alan.